So, Keith, good to see you today. Recently, we published a note on how public Wi-Fi is having an impact on the value of mobile. Before we dive into the detail of exactly how that's working, can you just give me a bit of an overview of the strategies that people are using for public Wi-Fi, both fixed and mobile networks?
Right, so where we need to start off on this sort of like point is realise how much more intelligence has moved to the devices over the past few years. So new devices like the iPhone and iPad automatically sense whether they're in the area of Wi-Fi networks and do the login and the authentication, and it's very simple and transparent for users. So what we've in effect got is a situation that to actually use Wi-Fi is becoming much easier than it was before. What this in effect means is that in the old days of voice and messaging, because of the simplicity of making voice calls and sending text from a handset was much easier than a fixed handset. Effectively, over the last 2 decades, we've had a big movement of traffic flowing from fixed networks and moving on to mobile networks. And this has been great for operator profitability. Nowadays, in the sort of data world, however, we're not seeing that. So consumption patterns at home tend to be over Wi-Fi networks than any sort of cellular networks. Easier to log in, as I said before, the devices are self-authenticating, and the mobile operators are not picking up any of that home traffic. The same is true in businesses. So, you go and visit a company. In the past, you might you take your voice calls on your own phone, but now you ask them for the Wi-Fi keys to use their Wi-Fi network.
So to a degree, it's a question of both the devices have become much smarter at finding Wi-Fi, but also consumers and business people have become much more used to having Wi-Fi at home and Wi-Fi in public places and Wi-Fi in businesses. It's become much more the norm.
Exactly. And what that's actually doing is conditioning the user to expect data traffic to be free. Now, there's a second element that's important here, which is years ago, when public Wi-Fi first started, it was very much on a paid-for model, and it was very complicated to authenticate. So places like some of the coffee houses would charge for it, and the prices in hotels was extremely expensive. What we've seen is like coffee houses, the prices come down. We've seen busy hotspot areas like certain airports offering Wi-Fi for free, and even the hotel prices have come down quite substantially. So people are expecting their nomadic needs of using data to be served by Wi-Fi. And if you like, what's happening here is the market for 3G and cellular data on the move is constraining. Now, there's a third really important point, and that's on new devices like the tablets, even like the Kindles. 3G capabilities are being priced in excess of Wi-Fi only. So what's happening in the minds of the consumer is that 3G is seen, or even 4G in the future, is seen as a premium, expensive service compared to the cheapness and ubiquity of Wi-Fi. And that's a very dangerous place for the industry to be finding itself in.
And one of the things I'd like to do today is just talk to you a bit about the UK market.
Yeah.
Because the UK market has a very interesting characteristics in that it shows both how fixed operators and mobile operators are starting to use Wi-Fi differently. Can you expand on that a bit for me, please?
Yeah, well, the UK is probably one of the few, or certainly the only major market in Western Europe and North America where the incumbent, in our case BT, doesn't have a mobile network. So for them, it's all about preserving value on that fixed network. they've looked at mobility for many years now, and they seem to have stumbled upon a business model which works. I don't know whether it's by luck or by accident, probably a bit of both. And what they've actually come up with is Wi-Fi as a differentiator. So they offer to all their users the opportunity of their home broadband network becoming a free hotspot, which they've done in partnership with a Spanish company called FON. What this in effect means is that BT over the years has managed to build a very impressive number of Wi-Fi nodes. Currently there's over 2 million of them. And what they're actually offering is for the top tier of broadband users, this FON-based crowdsourced Wi-Fi network, if you like, primarily in the suburbs, put together with a hotspot network that they've built themselves called Open Zone. They've offered access to that free to all their fixed broadband users. So in effect, BT have built a differentiator amongst their broadband base whereby they can go and get Wi-Fi access outside of the home or outside of the small business. Now, what this has meant is that the competitors to BT, again, we've got a very different market in as much as the competitors are the cable company, Virgin Media, and the DTH provider, B-Sky B. And we've also got a sort of like a home dual play provider called TalkTalk. But both Sky and Virgin Media have decided that they need to offer something on Wi-Fi as well. So Sky have bought the Cloud, which was the second biggest hotspot provider in the UK, and Virgin Media are starting trials where they're using their significant plant in the street cabinets around the UK to build public Wi-Fi networks. So what we're seeing, if you like, is the investment in Wi-Fi and public Wi-Fi being done by the fixed networks, not the mobile networks. So that's very different than, say, the US, where AT&T have gone and bought a hotspot provider of their own, and you know they're offering bundles now for their iPhone users where it's a mix of Wi-Fi and 3G or 4G, they call it in some instances, for their users. In the UK, it's predominantly the fixed operators who own that Wi-Fi infrastructure.
Although we saw at the recent brainstorms an example of how O2 are using Wi-Fi in a slightly different way. They're O2, one of the UK's operators. They were using it in terms of trying to improve engagement. Do you see that as a likely successful strategy?
Okay, so O2 and Vodafone are doing something interesting in this space. O2 have their Wi-Fi plans, which aren't launched yet, which are more based upon from what I can gather, a sort of like advertising funded model for people going into stores. It's not meant to support a use case where somebody goes and sits down, has a cup of coffee, answers their emails for half an hour, or somebody goes and sits down and in a hotel and catches up on their work, or perhaps watches a video for half an hour. The O2 use case is predominantly aimed at offering something for the retailers and something for their users, and I believe they're going to offer it for other mobile users in terms of deals when they're in particular stores.
So it's an interesting use of a two-sided business model. It's early days, but it's interesting stuff. I mean, but if we cut to the kind of overall question, which is public Wi-Fi destroying value in mobile, what would you say, Keith?
I would say that the early indications are definitely. And the reason I say that is because we're not going to get the type of use cases we did in the voice and messaging, where the mass UK consumer market or the mass business market use the mobile operators exclusively for their mobile data needs. We're going to have a lot of these nomadic cases where people just buy a device with Wi-Fi only and use it in coffee shops and hotels and airports. We're actually limiting the amount of use cases to where 3G and 4G is going to be used. Now, I admit that in the early days, voice and messaging for mobile operators was priced at a premium to the fixed operators. And as the volumes have shifted, the prices have become for voice minutes and text, similar to what you can get in home telephony bundles. Whether we'll ever see the price of data coming down to compete with the fixed networks is another matter, but it's obviously that price differential to the end consumer has got to shrink if we're going to get up to huge penetration levels.
So it's definitely affecting the case for building new 4G type networks. It's definitely affecting that, and it's also putting a pressure on current business models, I think, in our view, we would say.
Yeah, and I would say that the value of spectrum that the governments are hoping to get has got to be shrinking.
So there will be a more realistic spectrum auction, one would think, than perhaps some of the 3G auctions we saw in the past.
Yeah, so the German prices, the Spanish prices, the French prices look way, way down, and I'm sure that the UK prices will come down as well.
So what's next? What does the industry need to do? How does it need to cope with these changes?
Well, I think fundamentally it's about the value proposition. And the value proposition is like, how can you sell mobility of data to and carry that data on your mobile network and get the right pricing plans? Some of them may be instead of selling pricing plans exclusively for mobile handsets and then devices, perhaps you have to bundle them together. Perhaps when you sell into businesses, you sell them a huge data plan that they can spread amongst their workforce. But somehow the mobile operators have got to design a way that the prices are economical, they support the sort of mixed mode of access that's going to happen, and the cost differentials in the hardware comes down.
Keith, thanks very much.
Absolute pleasure.